Thanks very much, Ben. Hi, everybody. Hope we're feeling good coming into the afternoon here. I'm very privileged to get to present here and to hear all of the very skilled presenters that we've already heard so far. All right, I'll take it from the top here. Okay, so I began this project back in 2017 whenever I was an intern for a Brazilian American trade coalition, and they were looking at news sources. So one of my responsibilities was to take a look at what news reports were saying about Brazilian American relations. So it was somebody's job to collect from a couple specific sources, big red sources regularly, manually classify them, and put them into terms of like, this is government related, this is agriculture related, things like that. And it was a really great chance to see what media analysis can really do for a lot of different reasons. We are avid, immediate consumers of media information. Even if we don't read a whole article, we read a headline and that influences what we think. So with those things in mind, I wanted to know how I could take this further. Instead of collecting everything daily, what if it was automatically collected? Instead of classifying manually, what if I could get a machine learning system to do that myself? What if I could search for terms that I cared about? Instead of a few select sources from a couple places I have to visit all the time, what if it was just any source I wanted? These were the things that I set my goals for as I developed this project further. My first step was learning how to pull from this API specifically. It returns JSON metadata whenever you use an HTML request. So I put the keywords that I'm interested in and the other parameters into an HTML address, and I get back my data set essentially. That's what a lot of APIs do. And this one was free, so definitely helps there. And I was able to convert the JSON data into R pretty easily. The question was how to make the unification between R and this API a little easier. Thankfully, there were some people who already set out to do this. There was one GitHub user named M. Kearney who came up with a wrapper where you could input the parameters like you would in R, and then it would make the HTML address for you and pull that JSON data without you having to go to a separate browser or anything like that. In the upper left hand here, you can see what that output looks like once you give it the HTML address up there. This was useful, but the API had updated since this GitHub user posted this information, and I wanted more from it. So I ended up making my own copy of it. I forked it myself, and I thought that I was going to do a pull request once I was ready for it, but it looks like it hasn't been updated in a while, so perhaps not. Later, I realized that a German data science collaborative group called CorelAid released their own wrapper version called News Anchor. And this was also useful for me, but I didn't get to pull in the way that I wanted to, so I also tweaked that one myself. It was a new engaging way to sort of mess with another package. I had never created a package before, so it was definitely a great learning experience in that sense. And in the future, I might do my own pull request for this so that other people can see what I've added to it. Specifically, I added a function called daily recaps that allows me to pull once a day for the last 30 days, which for the free version of the API is the maximum distance you can go back. If you have a paid subscription, which was prohibitively expensive, you can go back 2 years, I believe. And you get a couple of different useful variables whenever you pull this out, like the names of the author, the time published, very important, and the first few sentences of the article themselves. Here's an example of some analysis that I could do by searching the FDA's website, look for all of the publications that have the FDA.gov keyword in the source. And whenever I pulled that back, I found that their website design had the category basically baked in there. So I could use regular expressions, which is like text extraction, text substitution, text magic stuff, to pull out this category and see if I could count it within that maximum time frame that I can pull from, the last 30 days. And I found that there was a lot of articles being published about, drugs, compliance, regulatory information. And this largest one up here, the scripts, I found out that that was the Federal Register. That's where they kept their Federal Register posts. So I could say that within the last 30 days, there were nearly over 200 Federal Register publications made by the FDA in that time. So that's one example. I wanted to expand this to do something relevant once I was able to automate my functions to be running, to poll for a couple specific things every day. So a great example for that, things that were constantly having articles come out day after day, were the Democratic primaries. So I had to get a little comfortable with l'apply, the list version of the apply function, which kind of works like a loop, but you can work better with vectors instead of I being 1 through etc. They're very useful. If you still use for loops in R, that's totally okay. That's not frowned upon. Lapply, sapply, all the apply functions are also very useful for that, and the dplyr function also helps with that. So I had to get comfortable with R's funky version of object orientation, or object-oriented programming, where you can have your metadata tied in with your regular data as a piece of the greater puzzle, essentially. So I was able to put everything into these nice organized rows here, with when I pulled the data, which keywords I used, whether the poll was successful, or whether I got a 200 error or a 404 error from the HTML. And I was very happy that I got it organized, because then whenever I come back to it, I don't have to worry about some weird way that I kept it. Being nice and tidy all the way, as Hadley Wickham would want. So this is where I had to get a little familiar with task scheduling in PC. Also a learning experience for me. You can use task schedule R, the package, and that incorporates itself into RStudio nicely. So you can basically tell your computer when you want a specific R file to run. And I chose 10 of the Democratic primary runners as my variable list of people that I wanted to collect for. I had to use last names only to keep things simple. I could have gone for, Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, etc. But I wanted to keep my collection straightforward, and then I can adjust the methodology as I need. At 7 o'clock every day, the function runs, and I pull that information for the prior day. And unfortunately, the free version also caps you at polling 100 articles each time. So in order to make this data more useful, I am able to choose a parameter that sorts via popularity. So the bigger news sources will come first. If I were able to pay for the yearly API subscription, I could poll as much as I wanted. A little better for like big data analysis uses. These are some quick tables that I generated from the data, but of course there's a lot we can do with this. You can use bag of words text analysis to sort of rank, popular words that come up in a bin, like say a certain week, you see coronavirus come up more often, say like a month or two ago. And then you see that its rank in the most common words increase. There's gonna be a presentation later today from my friend Gonzalo, who talks about the different ways you can do text analysis. So I won't dwell too much on that. Another example of a quick graph that I was able to make up here was the hour of the publication. I converted it from UTC to EST time, and I collected this from a poll of everything that mentioned Biden in the title. So I found out that in EST, a lot of the articles end up coming out around midday, depending on what's going on in that time period. And then in the graph below that, we can see that I made a time series of the articles containing Warren in the title. And you can see up at the top that that 100 cap is very frustrating because we could be seeing a lot larger spikes there. But it does give a rough estimate of the candidate's current popularity in the most popular news cycles. And if you get less than 100, then that's the total polled with Warren in the title. So we can see March 5th is when Warren decided to suspend her campaign. And just after that, there's a lag of about a week or so. The number of articles that include Warren in the title drop pretty sharply. So we can see that as an example of a lot of cycles basically moving on. But later on, as our situation with coronavirus has gotten worse, she's still been coming out with plans and things to show that her policy design is relevant to people. And she got a bump in media attention from that, basically. So depending on what you want, there's a lot you can do with this. I was hoping to, in the future, include polling data to see whether there's a time series correlation involved with ratings and what the news is saying about these candidates. Stock market data is another example of time series that you could lay over this to see what it's like. And then having just a variable set of debate information. Lots of possibilities there. So that's where my project is now, and I've talked a little bit about where my project will be going in the future. This is some of my contact information, and I think that about wraps it up for me. So a lot of interesting things to come with news analysis in the future.